We're going to bring in our special guest of the day here. Joining me because you asked for him, and I give the people what they want. I'm man for the Eagles Football Podcast Network, Shane Haff. Good morning, Shane. How you doing today?
Good morning, Phil. I'm doing good. How about you, man?
Fantastic. We've been trying to use this show as a 2-week gauge of where the Eagles are in free agency and in their offseason, talking about their weaknesses, talking about if this offseason so far tells us anything about where the Eagles are looking, at the draft. So big picture to start us off, how do you gauge the offseason and the story it's telling about the Eagles so far?
Yeah, it's very different from last offseason. Of course, last season, they're making the big impact signings, going for guys like Saquon Barkley and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and things like that. And obviously a very different Bryce Huff, I guess. I forget Bryce Huff, but Bryce Huff was pretty forgettable, if we're being honest. Yeah. So this year's different. And I know a lot of people were really there was a lot of angst on Eagles Twitter as free agency started to unfold. But this has been a lot more like what I expected free agency to be like this time around. I think so many teams take swings on big name guys in free agency and they pay these big contracts and everybody just equates like, oh, everybody's signing people. Everybody's getting better than us. And they forget the Bryce Huff of it all, that a lot of these big name free agent contracts turn out like that. And so I think, you make a splash signing when the market is right. And the Eagles did that last year with Saquon. They missed it with Bryce Huff. But for the most part, I think free agency is about filling out your roster to not have, major deficiencies that you get pigeonholed into. We must draft an edge rusher in the first round, no matter what, whether the value is good or not. And you see that with, the Eagles edge rusher room was looking pretty bleak after Brandon Graham retires, Josh Sweat leaves. We don't trust Bryce Huff. And you're looking at, man, Nolan Smith and Jalex Hunt's really it, huh? And they go get Josh Uche for $1.9 million. And, Josh Uche he had a really good 2022. Other than that, he hasn't been great. You go get Azeez Ojulari for 1 year, $4 million. And I think that was insane. I think Azeez is a good player, but you see him making moves like that, bringing in Doria Jackson to compete with Keely Ringo on the outside. And I think a lot of their moves are about competition and depth, but they don't make them have to do certain things. Like the contract you pay to Doria Jackson doesn't mean you have to start him. Right. Keely Ringo can win that job and you can play him. You could draft a cornerback in the first round if there's one you really like at 32 and just start him. It's the same thing at edge rusher. So I think that's what this offseason has been all about. It's been about filling out depth, adding competition, and going into the draft without an obvious, like, we must draft this position in the first round type of need.
I had a couple questions lined up, but you mentioned Bryce Huff there a few moments ago and how we spent big on him last offseason. And K1 had just said this. I, for one, am not giving up on Bryce Huff. I know a lot of Eagles fans just want the Eagles to move on from Bryce Huff and just eat the cap hit, trade him, get rid of him, whatever. But is there any potential that the Eagles can find a way to maximize what Bryce Huff can do and have him turn the corner? Like maybe his story in Philadelphia hasn't been fully written yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's always possible. This is a guy that was a good rotational pass rusher for the Jets. And, he didn't have a ton of snaps, but when he played, his like per snap metrics were some of the best in the league in terms of high quality pressures and things like that. And so it's certainly possible. He was always coming to Philadelphia, changing schemes and being asked to maintain that efficiency over more volume. And he struggled at both of those. Then he got injured. And I do think it started to get a little bit better prior to him getting injured. I think the biggest thing with Huff is that he just can't play the run. Like there's a lot of clips of him from this year getting blown up by tight ends and washed out of plays. And with the way the Eagles want to play their defense, having two high safeties, light boxes, you have got to be able to play the run. I don't know that that's Bryce Huff's fit. I can't imagine that Huff was a guy that Fangio really wanted into the building to begin with, because it's just not his style of player. So it's certainly possible. I've seen.
Well, is there, as Dives is asking, is there odds that he could get traded by the draft day or on one of the draft days?
Yeah, I mean,
is there any interest around the league? Do people realize that maybe he was a bad fit and might want to take a chance on him?
Yeah, I feel like if the Eagles could get him out of the building for nothing, they should do that, and they would do that, because I mean, it's pretty clear, right?
Yeah.
Could he turn it around? Yeah, but also he was a healthy scratch in the Super Bowl, and that tells you a lot about where Fangio is at with the guy. So I've kind of said all along, I would trade a pick to get Bryce Huff out of the building. It would save you like $16.5 million, not this year, but over the long haul with the way the dead cap and stuff works. Like, if you could trade Bryce Huff and a 5th round pick for like a conditional 7th round pick, I would do that in a heartbeat. I think the Eagles would probably like to get rid of him. I just don't know that there's a suitor out there for it. So it's possible. It's also possible that he'll bounce back. I don't think he's a worthless player.
Right.
I've seen his pass rushing skills on film. I just think it's going to be tough for him to make an impact in Philadelphia, given the scheme that they're asking him to play in.
You talk about, Uche Ojulari, obviously we got Nolan Smith and, Jalix Hunt here, and Dives another great question. He's on fire this morning with his jokes and his questions about the run defense on the edge. I mean, you mentioned that edge is an important thing in the draft to attack, first round or whatever. Are you concerned about the run defense? Brandon Graham, is a big loss on the edge. Josh Sweat's a big loss on the edge, in the run game as well. Ojulari and Uche, while there's potential there, stopping the run's a pretty big, important thing right there.
Yeah, and that's going to be a key thing to see if they're able to do it this year like they did last year, because like you said, you lose Brandon Graham, you probably lose Nakobe Dean. I mean, I don't know where Nakobe Dean's going to be at next season in terms of recovery and if he's going to be able to get on the field. But Nolan Smith's a great run defender. Surprisingly, he shouldn't be at his stature, but he is. You're still going to have Jordan Davis, Moro Ojomo on the inside, can help you out a lot there. You retain Zach Bond, and so Zach Bond gives you the unique ability to walk him down onto the line of scrimmage and get into 5 or 6 man fronts without really changing your base personnel. So that's huge. Cooper DeJean out of the slot is always going to be good in run defense. So the big question marks are that outside edge spot, which I think Azeez Ojulari is a fine run defender. Like, he's not spectacular, but he's not a net negative. And then whoever's going to be the other linebacker. And I would guess, as of right now, before the draft, I'd say it's going to be Jeremiah Trotter Jr., because I don't think Nakobe Dean will be back and healthy. And, one of the biggest things for Trotter, he keys run plays really quickly. Like, he's got a really high IQ. He can't anchor against offensive line. And so, we'll see if the guys up front are able to eat space for him and him go make plays. It's the same thing for Nakobe Dean, by the way. Like, that's the scouting report on Nakobe Dean. He's small, he's smart, he struggles to get off blocks, and they were able to keep Nakobe Dean clean and let him make some plays. So I'm not super concerned about the run defense. I never expect like an elite defense to be as good the next year, because defensive performance just isn't as sticky year over year. But I do think they'll probably be fine as a unit against the run next year.
I'll get to your question, K1, in a second, because I want to ask you about, you mentioned Jordan Davis's name when we're talking about the run there. And randomly, it wasn't part of the original agenda today, but Jordan Davis's name came up. We spent a good 25 minutes talking on the show this morning about what do the Eagles do with Jordan Davis. He's entering his 4th year. They got, till May 10th or whatever to pick up his 5th-year option. Do you let him play out the 4th year? Do you pick up the 5th option? Has he justified maybe a shorter extension instead of the 5th-year option? Or do you just play it, wait, and go and see what happens with him? Because, again, you got the big Jalen Carter extension looming next offseason. I think what you do with Jordan Davis is probably one of the toughest decisions to make for Howie Roseman right now.
Yeah, I would not pick up that 5th-round option for starters. That's the 5th-round option.
$12.5 million or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not paying Jordan Davis $12.5 million to be a run stuffer. Now, I like Jordan Davis. I think he's a big part of what they're able to do. And, I know people look at the snap counts, played 13 snaps in the conference championship game, 14 snaps in the Super Bowl. The Eagles were winning both of those games in blowouts. And he's more valuable than that snap count shows. I would like to extend Jordan Davis. I'd like to extend him and keep him in Philadelphia, but I'm not doing it anywhere near the top of the market because to this point in his career, he's been a run stuffer that hasn't, he's not a guy that you put on the field to play snaps against the pass. He doesn't have 500 snaps in any season of his career. And so if he takes a contract to come back to Philly as like a run stuffer, I'm fine with that. And I would love that. So I would try to work an extension with him. But
would Jordan Davis accept a short, 3-year deal with less than top tier money to stay here in Philadelphia?
Yeah,
I throw the number 3 years out there. I don't know if that's what they would want to do or not. I'm just using that as a starting point there.
Yeah, I don't know what he would accept. Typically, the Eagles have tended to give 4-year extensions to rookies going into that second contract. And so, would he take a 3 or a 4-year deal at, I don't know, $6-8 million a year? I don't know that he would do that.
I threw out the number 3 years, $20 million earlier in the show, and I don't know if he would accept that.
Yeah,
personally.
I'd sign that. I would bring him back at that in a heartbeat.
I mean, I would too, but I don't know if that would be enough for him. Why wouldn't he just say, all right, well, screw it. I'll play out the 4th year. I'll become a free agent. A dumb team like New England will pay me bigger, and I'll just cash that out like that, and then Eagles get the comp pick. I mean, I think it's a quandary on what to do there.
Yeah, I mean, at most, I don't think he would get a big deal in free agency. Like, you're signing pass rushers big in free agency. I don't think anybody would sign him. I'm not even sure the contract he would sign would be enough to qualify for a comp pick. And so I guess it's all about what his agent's telling him. And, maybe if his agent's telling him, hey, we can go get you 10 million on the open market, I kind of doubt it, but you never know. And wouldn't fault the guy for taking the swing.
I mean, we see it every offseason that teams overpay. No offense. I've been saying since day one that the Cardinals are going to regret paying $80 million for Josh Sweat because, he's not that. So teams always overspend in free agency when they've got that money to spend there. So we've been talking about all the different weaknesses on the defense. K1's asking about Sidney Brown. Obviously, right now, if the season was to start now, Sidney Brown would be your starting safety opposite of Reed Blankenship. And, I mean, when you look at the names, Sidney Brown, Christian McCollum, Steen, Andre Sam, that's your safety room behind Reed Blankenship now with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson gone. Where's your confidence level with Sidney Brown? Does Justin Simmons need to be brought in here or a Justin Simmons type to start, or is drafting a high-end safety or bringing in a safety to compete with Sidney Brown the way they need to go?
Yeah, man.
I'm not as high on Sidney Brown, the starter, as a lot of other people are.
Yeah, I think it's telling that whenever a safety would go down this year, which fortunately there weren't long-term injuries, but you had games where a guy had to leave for, a couple quarters or something like that. The Devontae Maddox came in as the third safety, not Sidney Brown. And maybe that's related to him having a hard time coming off that ACL injury more than it is him as a player. Maybe he is more fully removed from that next season and he's better, but they certainly didn't trust him this year. And you can see why. I mean, he's the type of player that I could see Vic Fangio having a hard time trusting. He loves to fly downhill and hit, but he's not the best tackler and he's not the best in coverage. And those are kind of the two things that Vic Fangio really wants to emphasize: open field tackling and being sound in your coverage. And I see Sidney Brown struggling with both of those. And honestly, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was the same way. So he's like a light version of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson a little bit. And I love Sidney Brown. I would be concerned if you just walk in with him as the starter next season. Now, if you bring in a Justin Simmons or if you draft a safety and Sidney Brown beats him out, fine. That means Sidney Brown played good in training camp, and I want Sidney Brown to succeed. I was higher. I knew who Sidney Brown was when the Eagles drafted him, and a lot of people didn't, because he was a safety I really liked that year. And it stinks that he was kind of derailed by injury that rookie season, and I think that bled into this year a little bit. But that's the biggest hole on the defense for me. The biggest thing I'm not sure about, the two things I'm not sure about the most on the whole team is who's safety 2 and who is linebacker 2. I think those are the two biggest questions that remain unanswered, and they're both on that spine of the defense.
I like this comment about, Noom saying it's discipline issue with Sidney. Not like he's not a disciplined person, discipline on the field. And I agree, because I said it from his rookie year. I was saying he doesn't know how to throttle down. Like, when you're on special teams, you can go full throttle the whole time. Just run downfield as fast as you can, make the big explosive play. But on defense, you've got to know when to shift gears, depending on what the offense is doing, and he lacks that. But, Justin Simmons' name keeps coming up again for the second straight offseason. And I keep telling myself, like, he wasn't brought in last offseason, even after Chauncey Gardner-Johnson returned, there was a lot of smoke with the Justin Simmons. And here we are again this offseason, the same smoke with Justin Simmons. Maybe we overvalue Justin Simmons as an Eagles fan base in free agency, and maybe he's not the perfect fit. Like, why is Justin Simmons' name constantly coming up, but yet he's never actually brought here?
Well, his name's constantly coming up because he's played for Fangio before. Yeah. So I think it was when Vic was a head coach in Denver, which is so long ago. Justin Simmons is definitely an older guy, but he's a guy that you can bring in, and it would fit those other things we talked about at the start. He's going to bring you a base level of competency at safety. He's going to bring you competition. It doesn't preclude you from drafting a safety, some of those sorts of things. And so, they had, like you said, they had a chance last year when Fangio came into the building and they didn't do it. And I kind of doubt they do it this time around too, just because there's been, just like you said, there's been Justin Simmons smoke for so long, but it's definitely that connection because he's played for Fangio before.
You talk about with the first pick in the first round or whatever they do with it, obviously Dives and Anthony. Anthony, by the way, was the one that asked the most for you to be on this show, just so you know. Anthony has been pounding the table, and I don't think Anthony realized. I think you may be the most frequent returning guest on this show over the last 3.5 years I've been doing this. So, Anthony, this is not the first time with Shane here. What are the odds that Howie bucks his trend again and maybe drafts safety? Starks, Nick, any of these guys that might be there around 32. What's the odds that, he changed his trend and drafted a cornerback in Quinion Mitchell last year. Maybe he goes against the norm and drafts a safety in the first round.
Yeah, well, first of all, shout out Anthony.
We love Anthony. Anthony's a great guy. I love him.
Yeah, absolutely. Second of all, I will never suppose that there's anything Howie won't do again, because if I was on a show, we'll say 13 months ago, if I was on this show 13 months ago and you asked me, I would have said the Eagles just don't draft cornerbacks in the first round. I also would have told you that they don't pay running backs. I literally not famously, because I'm not famous, but famously
You're
for me.
Famous in your own head, right?
Yeah, famously for me, like 4 hours before the Saquon Barkley signing broke, there was smoke about that, and I tweeted that I'll believe that when I see it, because Howie doesn't believe in paying running backs. Then they paid Saquon Barkley. I would have told you.
By the way, just so you know, I still get crushed for a tweet similar to that right before the signing down, saying I would not see Howie paying that kind of money, and people still pull up that tweet and share to me like, you're an idiot for saying this. I'm like, whatever. We all get one wrong occasionally, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also said that, I would have told you the Eagles just don't pay linebackers. And here we are with the top of the market linebacker contract. So I will never say what Howie won't do. But if I were going to point out tendencies, it's that the Eagles have tended to not value safety that highly. They haven't paid safeties. They haven't drafted safeties. They've let Chauncey Gardner-Johnson out of the building twice when he wasn't really going to make that much. They haven't signed Reed Blankenship yet. So we'll see. I know that's the hot thing that everybody's talking about right now, and I do think it's a hole in the defense right now potentially. And safeties are very important in Vic Fangio's scheme. The quote about it is that that safeties are the queens on Vic Fangio's chessboard, that he does so much with them and he asks them to do so much. And so maybe it's possible, maybe they're valued a little differently now, and maybe they'll end up going after one of these first round safeties. And I know that Nick Emanwari is the big guy because he got the 10.0 relative athletic score. And so we'll see. I would love to see him bring in a safety. I fall in love with safeties every year, and the Eagles never draft him. And so maybe I'm a little jaded when it comes to safety as well.
I won't lie. I'm not getting my hopes up because the last safety I fell in love with was Banks a few years ago. We drafted Nolan Smith instead at that point of that draft, I think it was. And yeah, exactly. You mentioned Reed Blankenship's name. Obviously, this offseason, you got 3 names with contracts in limbo. Well, outside of Jordan Davis, you got Reed Blankenship. We know Cam Jurgens will get some form of an extension at some point, and Dallas Goedert as well is kind of in limbo. Do you see Howie we'll just keep Cam Jurgens out of it because he's not going to let Cam Jurgens go anywhere. That'll be dealt with. Reed Blankenship and Dallas Goedert, what happens with both their contract situations and their spots on this team, big picture here?
I think Reed comes back, and I think Goedert does not. So I don't think you can, as much as they haven't super invested into the safety position, I don't think you can let Reed Blankenship go too. And I don't think Reed Blankenship's going to command a great contract. I mean, if we're going to be honest, if we're going to honestly assess Reed Blankenship as a safety, he's a replacement level starter. He's a slightly above average safety that Eagles fans tend to overvalue their players. They did it with Mekhi Becton. They do it with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They do it with Reed Blankenship. And Reed Blankenship, he's got that knack for making clutch interceptions that we love so much. And I love the guy. He's probably in the 15 to 20 range of safeties in the NFL. I think you bring that guy back, and I don't think it's going to cost you a ton. So I think they bring him back. Dallas Goedert, I think they probably move on from. There's been lots of smoke that he won't even be on the roster this season, and I'll be really disappointed if that happens because I think they're in a Super Bowl window and they have no clear replacement for Goedert, and it just doesn't make sense to me.
Is there a trade market for Dallas Goedert? Because we keep talking about them trading Dallas Goedert maybe, but we don't hear rumors that teams are interested in Dallas Goedert.
Yeah. If they trade Goedert, I doubt they would get more than a day 3 pick for him. I think I would not understand the trade Goedert for a 3rd round or a day 3 pick or just to outright cut him. That just doesn't make sense to me. But there's been a lot of smoke about it, and they brought in several tight ends in free agency, and it kind of makes you think it's going to happen. But if it doesn't, I think your ideal scenario with Goedert is that he plays out this season and then he hits free agency. I don't want to sign a 3-year extension with a oft injured 30-year-old tight end, but he's very valuable in this offense. So I would love to have him back in 2025 and make a run for the back-to-back Super Bowls.
We got our first offensive question here with you, and it's who's running back 2, only because K1 is the biggest Kenny Gainwell stan of all time. Actually, K1 might be Kenny Gainwell. I'm not really sure about that. So running back 2, answer K1's question. Is it A.J. Dillon or is it Will Shipley? Or is it somebody else that's not on the roster yet?
Yeah, or as I say, or somebody else, because that's another. We didn't mention this one earlier, but yeah, A.J. Dillon, same sort of move. Brings in competency, doesn't preclude Will Shipley from winning the job or you from drafting a day 2 or day 3 running back. So if we can just assume he's fully healthy, which we don't know, I'm not a doctor.
I don't even think the Eagles truly know that at this point.
Yeah, but he was out all of last year with a neck injury. So if we can just assume he's fully healthy, I think he's probably your running back 2. He would bring a nice compliment. I love Kenny Gainwell. I thought he was a great fit for the Eagles. I would have been concerned if Saquon had to miss 3 games and Kenny Gainwell is your feature back, because as much as the Eagles run the ball, I think that would be tough. I think Kenny Gainwell is a good complementary back. I don't think he's really has like bell cow capability. I do think not Aaron Jones. Goodness. I do think AJ Dillon has that capability. I mean, there was fantasy people and Packers fans getting upset just a few years ago because he was out touching Aaron Jones in games. And that was kind of crazy, but it was the thing the Packers did. So at his best, he's going to be like a downhill running back. He's going to thrive in short yardage. He's not going to turn 2-yard runs into 15-yard runs in the way that Saquon can, but he's also not going to turn 2-yard runs into 3-yard losses the way that I'm not going to throw Will Shipley under the bus. We haven't seen him play enough, but maybe he could, or that maybe Kenny Gainwell could. He's just going to take what's there. And when you've got an offensive line that's so good, that's really valuable. And so I liked bringing him in. If he's healthy, I think he's probably in a competition with Kenny Gainwell. Goodness, I'm all over the place. With Will Shipley and with a day 3 running back. Like, I'd be surprised if the Eagles get out of this draft without taking a guy on day 3. You're going to throw all 3 of those guys up there, let them compete against each other and see who is RB2. But my money would be on AJ Dillon unless the Eagles go earlier than I think at running back.
All right, so you keep mentioning the draft. We keep mentioning the draft. Every Friday on this show, the people. So this is not my mock draft. This is the comment section running this mock draft. And I dives, duck, a lot of comments made these picks. This was the mock draft we ran this morning. Now, so we were sitting at pick 32, and Walter Nolan was there, but we were offered 49, and I forget which draft pick to trade back. They made me accept that. And then Denver offered 51 and a 4th to move back 2 spots. So our first pick came in at 51 here, and this is the draft that the people chose. So I want you to grade this work from the people here.
All right. This is going to be tough because I haven't watched every position group yet. But, okay, so Kenneth Grant.
I mean, towards the end, those last 2 picks, we just rapid fired because we were waiting to bring you on. But this is, at least through pick 164, is where the people chose all these players here. And if a draft like this, what would this mean for the offseason for the Eagles?
Okay, so Kenneth Grant, I've got a 2nd-round grade on. That's good value at pick 51.
So you basically got Kenneth Grant plus that 2nd and 4th round pick next year. So you're basically got all 3 of those in that one spot there.
Yeah. So I like the Grant pick. He's going to be kind of your run stuffing defensive tackle. You're probably letting Jordan Davis go in this scenario, but I like Kenneth Grant in that spot. I have not yet watched offensive line, so I can't comment on Tate Ratledge other than I've heard his name a lot, and the Eagles definitely need to replenish their interior O-line depth. So I'm going to assume that's a good pick there just from some of the things I've heard, but I haven't personally watched him yet. Okay. Gunnar Helm's great value. I also put a 2nd-round grade on Gunnar Helm, and so I would love him at 96. He's my tight end 3. He's primarily a blocking tight end before 2024, and he became a big part of the passing attack. So this is what I want in a tight end. Like, don't give me the Harold Fannin Jr. stuff. Like, I'm not interested in a tight end that can't block. If you can't get in line and block, you're not a tight end. You're a big slot receiver, and you're not as good at it as a regular slot receiver. So Gunnar Helm, I would really like that pick. And then we're getting into guys that I haven't really watched a lot other than Dylan Sampson. I watched Dylan Sampson. I actually also gave Dylan Sampson a 2nd-round grade. So that's great value from there as well. Let's see what we're running. Yeah. The only real issue with Sampson is he's undersized and he only has 1 year of significant touches. And so I have questions about, can he survive a big workload at the NFL level? In the Eagles, he wouldn't worry about that. He's not going to get a big workload. He's going to be a backup. And so he's lightning quick. He is good as a blocker. Like, Tennessee runs their big spread stuff and use only the 5 offensive linemen and the running back for 6-man protections. And so he had a lot of pass pro responsibilities and was good at that in Tennessee. So surprisingly, he's also one of those guys that will just put his head down and take what's there and not try. A lot of times you get the speed guys that want to bounce everything, and that's not really Dylan Sampson. You know, he's got an 80% conversion rate on 3rd and 4th down in short yardage situations, 3rd and 4 or less. And so, yeah, I would really like that pick. And then I haven't watched defensive backs yet. So overall, though, I like the direction of that draft. I would be surprised if the Eagles don't end up. Wait, is pick 134 day 3? I don't think it is.
No,
I think it is. Yeah, I think day 2 goes to like 120 something. I can't remember now. The comp picks things always messes me up. There's 96 right.
I'm trying to do the math in my head right now, and I can't. You know,
I want to say it's like 106 total picks by the end of day 2. I would be surprised if the Eagles get out of day 2 without an edge, just given the landscape of the room. But yeah, overall, I like that draft.
All right. So I mean, so then getting into the draft and all, and you know, Howie at 32, you know, there's a lot of push for the Eagles to trade back, obviously, and we're all going to sit around on our draft shows and whatnot and wait for pick 32, and then he's going to trade back. But there is also that thread that maybe he moves up in the draft, that there's a guy like Starks or, you know, whatnot that falls to a certain level that Howie is comfortable not spending too much to move up 10, 12 spots. Obviously, he's not going to move up into the top 10 or anything like that. That'd just be too costly for him. But I know we're 4 weeks, 5 weeks out from the draft at this point. Where do you see Howie going? Staying put, trading up, or trading back?
Oh man, that one's
it's tough, man.
Because it depends. I mean, I think you're better off predicting a trade than predicting a stick and pick. But
yeah,
the question is where. Maybe I think an ideal world for the Eagles would be that like a Jackson Dart is still there at 32 and some team wants to trade up to get his 5th-year option. Honestly, the last time the Eagles were at 32, that's exactly what happened, right? The Ravens wanted to trade up to get Lamar Jackson at the end of the 1st round. I think that's your ideal scenario if you are the Eagles. I don't know that necessarily happens. I think it's a weak QB class. And so I'll say the Eagles are more likely to have a small trade up. They got a lot of draft capital next year. I could see a guy starting to fall into the late 20s, and the Eagles want to make a small move up and burn some of that capital.
Am I that loud, Dooms? I mean, I do have a loud voice. I can't help it. I do shout when I talk, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I could see it. I could see them doing anything. I think the one thing with Howie right now is that there's no predictability with what Howie will do. And until we see more of these top 30, you know, visits start to get officially announced for the Eagles, we really won't really know. I mean, the reports yesterday were so far that there've only been 4, and they're all offensive linemen. You can't really make that judgment yet just based off of 4 guys. You know what I mean? Out of the dozens that'll be brought in at this point.
Yeah. And I do think if you want to have like a guide rail that the Eagles are going to draft player XYZ, go look up their relative athletic scores. The Eagles love to draft athletic guys. That's been one of the things that has changed since like the Jalen Reagor pick. And so if you go look back at, I think it's the last 4 drafts, the worst athlete that they've drafted is Anais Smith, who is still like a 7.3 relative athletic score, which is basically, for people unfamiliar with those, res.football is the website. It's slow. It's great. It's free. And it basically like coalesces all of the combine measurements and drills into a 0 to 10 point scale. And basically 10 is the most athletic guy ever to test at the position. And it equates to percentile. So the worst athlete they've drafted in like the last 4 years was 73rd percentile. And so when you hear Malachi Stark's name thrown around, he's at like a 5 point something. That makes me pretty skeptical he would be the Eagles' 1st round pick. So, but you can check that out. It's a great free resource. It is a little slow. It's not super mobile friendly, but it's a really cool deal. You can also follow at MathBomb on Twitter, and he posts a lot of those cards. If you want to go on mobile, it'll be easier to look for players by searching his tweets. But you can check that out. I do think that a lot of people are talking themselves into Malachi Starks. It would be a departure from what the Eagles have valued in the draft, for sure.
Interesting. Well, you can also just follow Shane Haff and the Eagles Pinball Podcast Network on all social media platforms, because obviously you guys do a great job breaking down all these prospects and breaking down all the film on all these guys and giving your opinions. And as the comments have said, they love and respect all the work that you do and everybody else on the team over there. So that's the other option, right? So what's next on the Pinball Podcast Network in the coming week?
Yeah, we're going to keep chugging through our position rankings on Armchair Scouts. So we're going to be we're double dipping next week because we accidentally missed this week. So next week we're going to do edge rushers and linebackers. So we'll have 2 episodes out. Birds of the Round Table is every Tuesday night, doing whatever we can talk about at the moment. Johnny and I, we're on like a short hiatus because Johnny's wife just had their baby. Congratulations.
That's who's winning the off season right there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So congratulations to Johnny and Elle, but we'll take a week probably off. And I mean, I don't know why we could just record in the middle of the night when he's awake with the baby, but we'll be back and we'll start hammering Eagles specific draft stuff on the Shane page probably in 2 weeks. And so, and then of course, obviously your morning show, The Check Down. If you guys aren't listening to that, you should be. It's my morning.
Why people are, but they are. Yeah.
It's my morning.
It's a precursor to what we're going to talk about on this show, basically every single morning.
Yeah, it's the morning routine for me. I get out of bed, I get my cup of coffee, and I listen to what Phil had to say for the last 8 to 10 minutes, and it keeps me from having to check all of the blogs and Adam Schefter's account to see what's going on in Eagles land all the time.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much, Shane, for coming on. We'll obviously have you on again soon, maybe before or just after the draft. There is a lot of reports here that a lot of people want to see me on the draft show with you guys, since I know nothing about the draft, but they want me on the draft show. So we might be working on something. Dives and I were already chit-chatting about that. But, guys, thank you all very much for tuning in. Please, again, remember, hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on replay, I check all comments. I respond to all comments and questions if you've got something that you missed. But, again, guys, everybody have a fantastic weekend. Go Birds. Bubbles up. Pop, 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 julep. Pop, 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 julep. Pop, 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 julep.